Okay, folks, so welcome back. This is part two of implementing the cost leadership strategy. So to recap, what we did in part one is we retooled our action capture camera. We have differing inputs and differing outcomes. So what you need to know is for these top three components, they're all relatively expensive for what you get in return for them. For example, if I change back to an 11 millimeter lens, it costs me $3 more, but it only gives me 0.1 star. So I leave that at a 10 millimeter, which is what I had changed it to. Whereas if I put in an additional dollar into camera housing, $1 gets me that same 0.1 star. So there's differing effects, right, of the amount of money that you put into your camera to get the desired outcomes. So I've retooled it and come up with cost of $131.37 overall. So what I intend to do here is talking about some of these other bullet points for the cost leadership strategy. Remember, build efficient scale facilities, tightly control production cost and overhead, minimize cost of sales or R&D and service, build efficient manufacturing facilities, monitoring cost of activities provided by outsiders, and simplifying our production processes. Some of those things we've already done. Some of them we have to do on these other screens. The easiest one is actually found on corporate social responsibility and citizenship. I'm going to do a couple of things while I'm here. The first thing is I'm going to institute the Supplier Code of Conduct and compliance monitoring of suppliers. That really closely aligns with monitoring the cost of activities provided by outsiders. So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer that we do that. We implement that. It costs us $500,000 a year, but we get some benefit from it. Okay. Also, if we want to be a good corporate citizen, we probably need to implement on-site cafeteria and childcare facilities and do some additional safety and lighting. Those two things right there help us to get an additional 100 units of production for cameras for each of those things that we do. So implementing those cost us 500,000 annually and 600,000 annually, but we get a big boost in our productivity. Okay. So all of those things are about keeping our costs low. We're having to invest some money to get lower cost. So I'm going to go back to compensation and facilities now. You guys are going to have to trust me on this when I tell you the best way for you to get all of this is going to be for you to read the participant's guide. You're going to have to trust the things that I tell you here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the base wage for my employees by 2% because our employees expect a 2% raise. And when we give them the 2% raise, that improves their productivity. We also want to lower our service cost. To lower our service cost, we can give an assembly quality incentive to help reduce the number of units that we have coming back for warranty repairs. So I go from 240 to 260, and my warranty expected claim rate remains about 7%. But as we do that over time, and we continue to increase, what you'll see is that's going to reduce your expected claim rate. You have to do it consistently in order to get the desired outcome. Okay. Now, I also have this very weird philosophy that the most productive workers we have are those workers that are with us. So I'm going to give my workers an attendance bonus of $1,000 per worker per year, and I'm going to increase their fringe benefits package by 20% to $2,400 per worker per year. And I'm going to give them some additional training to help to make them more productive. Okay. So as you see here, doing all of those things has increased the projected productivity of my team to 3,255 units per year. Before we started, their productivity was at 3,000 units per year. I want to talk to you next about the Action Capture assembly facility. You've got 300 spaces in your facility, but you only have 280 workstations. Our fourth bullet point says build efficient manufacturing facilities. Now, I'll talk to you about the book, The Goal, the movie, The Goal. And one of the things that it mentions in there is you don't want to have any empty spaces in your factory, because what will happen is workers who are bumping up against a bottleneck will continue to produce even though there's a bottleneck, and they will fill up that bottleneck's staging area, and then they'll begin to stash product elsewhere in the facility. So I'm going to put in those 20 workstation facilities. And Globus tells us that we need additional workstations to avoid overtime assembly. It says we need 13 additional workstations. Now, you can only expand in units of 10, but you can put in as many workstations as you want. So in order to cover the 20 that we need, you would put in 20, or excuse me, in order to cover the 13 that we need, you would want to put in 20 additional workstations, which gives you 320 spaces. And right now you've got 20. So if you put in 33 additional workstations, you have just enough capacity to cover demand. However, there's a problem. Your facility is not going to be efficient because you're still going to have the hole in the facility. So instead of putting in 33, you want to go ahead and put in 40 workstations, even if you don't need all of those workstations. That gives you no hole in your facility. Plus, it gives you a little excess capacity. And if you'll go back and read the goal, what it'll tell you is you need excess capacity. You can't run your factory at 100%. Okay? So one more thing that I'm going to cover is I'm going to talk to you about the robotics upgrade. You've got the option to install robots in your factory. When you do that, you reduce the number of workers that you have on your assembly teams. Your workstation replaces one of those workers with a robot. So now you have 3 workers and a robot at every workstation instead of 4 workers. If you do the upgrade, we simply select Initiate Upgrade. Now, this is a one-time decision. You cannot go back and undo that upgrade. Once you install it, it's there. So I think it might be a good idea to initiate the upgrade. And Globus gives us some scenarios of how we finance that upgrade, because the upgrade is going to cost us quite a bit of money. Go to your Globus Participants Guide and it'll tell you exactly how much it's going to cost. But we depreciate them straight line over 20 years. So it's going to cost $48 million in capital cost to upgrade. 48 million, depreciation of that is 5% per year, or $2.4 million. Is going to reduce our labor costs. It's going to increase our maintenance cost. And then it's going to cost us some interest if we finance it. Now, you could do 100% with the stock issue. If you issue stock, your savings are 2.3 million. You could finance half of it with a loan, or you could finance 75% with a loan. Okay. I'm going to select the 75% with a 10-year loan. What you need to do and what you need to consider is to match the cost, or match the life of your capital assets with the financing that you use to purchase your capital assets. These assets have a life of 20 years, and in a perfect world, we could finance them for 20 years. And once they're paid for, then we would simply surplus those items or sell them for scrap, and we would start over. We don't have the option of doing a 20-year loan, okay? We do have the option of doing a 10-year loan and financing 75% of the cost. That means that we have to come up with 25% of the costs of those workstations that we're putting in. That's not a bad deal, okay? That would give you a 3-to-1 debt to equity ratio on that acquisition of those assets. And that's not a bad deal for you, okay? So we'll select that option. It tells us that your net annual cost impact of the robotics upgrade, as we've got things configured right now, our net annual cost of that is only $43,000. Trust me when I tell you that robotics upgrade is actually going to save you a ton of money over the long term. There will be years when you save millions of dollars from doing the robotics upgrade. So if you're wise, you would go ahead and do that robotics upgrade right now. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to tell you is you have two factories. Those factories are located in Taiwan. You have workers in each of your factories, and those workers talk to one another. Those workers do the same basic job and work for the same basic company. So your Globus Participants Guide tells you that the best practice and what you've done in the past is to keep their compensation exactly the same. Now, when you see the changes that we made for the workforce in our camera facility, look at our drone facility. We're not making any changes over there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make those changes mirror what we're doing in our camera facility. The reason I'm doing that is these workers work for the same company. They do the same type of work. They need to have the same compensation package. Now, one caveat on that is assembly quality incentive for your drone workers needs to be twice as much as for your camera workers. The reason for that is the drone is more complicated for you to manufacture, so you need to pay them twice as much per unit because they only produce half as many units. And when you'll do that, what you'll see is the total compensation per workers per year is the same amount. It's $26,308 in both of your factories. Okay. And we've got very good productivity in both of our factories. Now, I'm also going to tell you that initially, even though I haven't changed marketing on the drone, I haven't changed product, price, place, or promotion on the drone, I'm going to go ahead and build out that facility and add those 10 additional workstations so that I don't have my hole in the factory, so that I have that efficient manufacturing facility. Okay. I'm also going to do the robotics upgrade for my drone facility, and I'm going to finance 75% of it with a 10-year loan. Now, given these options, Globus is telling us it's going to cost us $102,000 per year. Okay. That's okay because the long-term savings are going to far outweigh the short-term cost of that. Okay. So what we're doing is simply making a trade-off. All right. So this is your compensation and facilities decisions. We've made changes in the way that we're making our camera, and we've made changes in our facility in which we make our camera. So I'm going to take you back to product design. And what you need to see is our product design costs are now down to $127.75. Before we started making the changes in our facility, our cost per unit was $131. We're down by about $4 because we're achieving economies of scale and we're lowering our production cost per unit. Okay. The last thing I'm going to talk to you about is going to be in part 3. So stay tuned for part 3 coming out soon.